Catus Maximus here with the Icon. This happens to be the metric Stubby Flex ratcheting wrench set. I did not buy these retail. I saw these at a pawn shop. They were 75 bucks. I thought, oh, they're probably 100 bucks, and I wasn't going to get them. I looked up on my phone, and Harbor Freight wants a whopping $145 for this set. And so I thought, all right, I'll give them a shot at half off. I suppose they ended up down there at a pawn shop because somebody was so disappointed. Although you'd think they would be able to return them, but maybe, who knows, Harbor Freight's been getting tougher with their returns, so maybe it was due to a restocking fee or something like that. They do have a lot of fingerprints on them. Look like they've been used just a little bit. Anyway, 10-piece set, ratcheting, metric, flex head wrench set. They do use a through hole on the side for the ratcheting, or to insert the ratcheting pawl, which is a little different from, say, the Pittsburghs. Their old original Stubby ratcheting wrench sets, that those had internal pawls and had just a little bit stronger buckle. We can see that these have a through pin, pretty decent resistance. But the old Pittsburghs, now these are like the original ones, and then they replaced these with even worse ones. So these are really OG Pittsburghs. These actually had a replaceable screw, so if the spring in there got loose, you could actually take it apart and tighten it back up. If that pin broke, you could, of course, replace it. The big issue with the original Pittsburgh set is that it was only a 5-piece set. So it was 8 and then 10, 12, 13, and 14, where this is at least 10 through 19. As opposed to the early days of Icon, Harbor Freight does have replacement individual wrenches. Like in the middle of the page, you can click order parts or something like that, and it'll download a PDF, and they give you part numbers and prices for individual wrenches. So that was always the big question when the Icon came out, is sure that you can get a warranty replacement out of Harbor Freight if you break one, but if you lose one or get stolen or something like that, then how are you going to replace it? So now they're offering individual ones. That's probably, the nicest things I'm going to say about them. They seem to work pretty well. The problem I really have with these, and I've inspected these a little bit, is that they don't seem to cut the mustard quite as well as even the old Pittsburghs. One is the fact that I just like them more. See, neither of these is really rebuildable. They do put glue in there, so I suppose you can chip that out and remove the pawl. And on a Stubby, it's not such a big deal that this material is removed out of the head. But not having a screw is, it's a plus or minus. This pin can be quite strong, but I still like the idea of the rebuildability. But where they start to come up short is they're not as short as they claim to be. Here's the old Pittsburgh. Here's the Icon. The thing's almost an inch longer, so they're not as stubby as the old Pittsburghs, which is just a little bit annoying. I think if they're going to be stubby, they'd be as stubby as the older ones, so I'll probably end up keeping these few Pittsburghs in along with these Icons just because they're just a little bit shorter. They may fit in an underdash situation where these Icons won't. What's even more disappointing is it appears that our Harbor Freight's already starting to cheapen out. These are really expensive, as expensive proportionally as any of the other Icon tools, but they're not made to the same specification. I should mention that I did have the original, or first series, whatever you want to call them, Icon Stubby reversible set, and they're not as short as their own Icon reversible Stubbies. That's also a disappointment. These and the original Pittsburghs are about the same size, so I don't know why they chose to make these just a little bit longer. Other issues. If we really start taking a look here, we can see that the stamping just is not very good, and on a lot of these, the stamping's like that. It's just really very thin, barely put in there, and that's a little disappointing because the stamping on the original Icons was, pretty, not too deep, but more than deep enough. Nice definition, really just a nice stamp, and you can see they have a nice little touch where they did 10 millimeter. This is just 10 and 10, no mm. They seem just a little bit cheaper. The stamping's not quite as good. If we really look here, you can just see, it's kind of hard to tell, but there is a subtle difference in the chrome. The chrome seems a little bit darker, a little bit thicker on this, or just a little bit, it seems to be nicer quality chrome on this. That just may be a personal opinion or just the way it looks to my eyes. But the stamping is not as good. They don't have the MM. They're longer than these or the Pittsburghs. And then the last thing that was really kind of throwing me is they're both of these are Taiwanese, but I don't think they actually came from the same factory, because if we look at the box ends, if we align these, we can see that there's just a totally different shape. I mean, it's surprising, but I don't know why there is a different shape in the open end. The other thing we can notice is these are pretty symmetrical. You can see that where they go around, they have a nice thickness. The thickness here is pretty close to the thickness here. But on these, they're just not quite the same. We can see it's quite a bit thicker up here than it is down there. Like that bottom jaw, if we really get close, we can see on these original, on these original icons, there's just come on now, just a little bit more meat, or it's more symmetrically forged than it is on this. And then there's just a whole bunch of extra buckle on there, or a back end, for no apparent reason. So this forging just does not look quite as good a quality. Let's go ahead and they talk about precision sizing. Let's go ahead and take a look. First, we'll measure the original icon. All right, we're looking at 10.15 millimeters there. Making sure I get the absolute tightest reading. It's amazing how much that reflects in the camera. Let's take a look at the Pittsburghs, the original high-quality Taiwanese Pittsburghs. These original Pittsburghs are clearly tighter. We can get down to 10.13 millimeters on that. Now, let's take a look at these Stubby flexes from Icon. See how how precise they are. So I'll give them credit there. The open end is sized pretty well. 10.15 millimeter. Oh, 10.13 there. So they're sized like the original Pittsburghs, and actually a little better than this particular 10 millimeter. Anyway, that's the video I have about these icons. For $145, they're not worth it. Find something else. So Blackhawks, there's a huge number of manufacturers of stubby flex head ratcheting wrenches. And sure, you get convenience of it, easier to use warranty, but it seems apparent to me that these icons are just not made quite to the same standard as some of their other wrenches, or I don't know what the newest boxes of the other icon wrenches are, but they just don't seem to be made to quite as high quality, or quite to the same standard. They're nonsensically a little bit longer. They're kind of in between a stubby and a standard length. Poor stamping, and the chrome just kind of has that hue. If anybody, any of my viewers has these or buys them and compares them to other icon wrenches, you'll see that the chrome just doesn't seem to have the same luster. It doesn't seem to be the same quality. And for the amount of money, really, find something. I recommend you do your homework. At least do that, because for $145 pretty much, and that'll pretty much get you just about any of the brands out there except for maybe tool truck brands. And it's kind of sad to see that Harbor Freight isn't even insisting on the same fit, or finish and overall quality as some of their other icon tools. In my opinion, it essentially reeks of Harbor Freight coming out with the Icon brand, and then now is trying to push the profit margins on them by just coming out with additional wrench sets and then pulling down the quality of them just a little bit compared to their initial ones. And we know Harbor Freight's done that, because this is a great example. These original Pittsburgh stubby ratcheting ones were actually pretty nice, and then they replaced them with cheaper versions that were labeled the same thing and had the same part number, but were not the same wrenches. And it appears they're pulling the same tactic with Icon now. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Till next time, Catus Maximus out.